It certainly was an educational experience in terms of centralization, debt, like monetary policy that I hadn't had to date. You can't have on-chain FX with just dollar stablecoins. What we've seen the past 5-10 years, the growth of stablecoins today, I would call it a grassroots retail to institutional arc. Local stablecoins, it will go in reverse. It will be an institutional to grassroots to retail.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Frontera, the podcast where we analyze what's happening in crypto in Latin America. I'm Av, co-founder and CEO of Bando and Espacio Crypto. And as always, I'm with my great friend Kush, founder of Odyssey Labs, Ben Reid, who's leading all stablecoin initiatives in Bitso, everything around MXMB, everything around Juno. And Ben, we're really happy to have you. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for having me, guys. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And remember to subscribe to the newsletter, to the Frontera newsletter. We've been producing some banger analysis. We just posted a couple report on Etherfu's new project. Also, we have a couple that are, as Ben said, all-time favorites. The FX Red Ocean is one of them. So let's start understanding your story on crypto, Ben, because you've had a long run. You've worked at top crypto companies. So how did you end up in crypto, man?
I've had a long run, but not the longest run in crypto. I'm a reformed TradFi guy, as I think a lot of people are in the space. And my journey started a long time ago as a derivatives trader in Chicago. I traded equity options through the great financial crisis. Had a very interesting perspective on TradFi from that perspective. Moved into tech, moved into a series of e-commerce roles, but then ended up in Fintech, payments related roles, kind of credit card stuff. Ended up at essentially a neobank here in the States, leading payment and credit card issuance. And then when I started looking for my next role, for me, crypto is kind of like the final frontier. It's not like I touch every last area of finance, but I touched a lot of it in what I just described, and like it was like the final frontier was crypto for me. And I'd been following the space for a while, just didn't have professional experience, and kind of ended up moving into it, and was lucky enough to join Kraken for a stint as global head of BD. My background's kind of a mix of business development and GM kind of operating leadership roles. Fortunate enough to join Kraken. And it was a relatively short stint, but almost from day one there, I started getting involved in stablecoin related initiatives. Kraken was looking at joining the global dollar network with Paxos at the time, USDG, so that stuff fell on my team. There's some investments in stablecoin issuers in Europe that were coming in. I just kind of jumped right in, along with a whole bunch of other things. When you're at an exchange like that, like you kind of see the whole spectrum of crypto. But for an ex-TradFi guy like me, stablecoins just jived, and I think I was able to sink my teeth in a little bit faster and easier and just add more value than some of the other stuff. And so when I moved on from Kraken, it was just a natural fit. I ended up consulting for a stablecoin issuer for a bit in Europe. And then I was fortunate enough to link up with Bitso, which I couldn't have been more excited about. Been following the company for a while. I had friends who work there, and when I learned they were looking for somebody to lead stablecoin issuance, I'm biased, but I couldn't imagine a cooler job. To me, this is the coolest job in all of crypto, to lead stablecoin issuance for Bitso particularly, who I just think is so uniquely positioned in LATAM and also in terms of like potential for stablecoins. So
I think it's really interesting that you have basically covered these different facets of TradFi, and then you say the final boss maybe is stablecoins and crypto writ large, and then you sort of end up landing at Kraken, which is one of the world's leading exchanges, only then to find yourself in Bitso, which is Latin America's leading exchange, right? And specifically working on stablecoins again, right? And so what is it? And we've seen so much going on in the stablecoin landscape. Circle just IPO'd, Bridge was acquired, right? There's a lot of energy flowing into the entire stablecoin thesis recently, right? I think Circle's success somewhat represents, I think, the need for people to get exposure to this asset class recently, right? And so walk us through this sort of meta strategy, how you think about stablecoins, why they matter specifically to Bitso, and what you are taking from your TradFi experience and now thinking about and developing specifically within the Bitso ecosystem.
For my background, there's sort of a few things I think come together. Obviously, trading through the great financial crisis, anybody who lived through that and in particular saw, like, when you trade equity options, and you're staring at, and I traded on a screen, I didn't trade in a pit, but you start to get a feel for like the market speaks to you a little bit in terms of like the pricing and what's going on, and the skew in the options, and like you can kind of feel what's going on, and you could literally see the market like tearing apart. Like you could see it creaking on some of those days, like Lehman Brothers and stuff. And so I didn't end up like being like a burn down the house, burn all the bridges kind of person, but like it certainly was an educational experience in terms of centralization, debt, like monetary policy that I hadn't had to date. And so that's like one thing that probably has stuck with me. And you can see how for a lot of people's experiences like that lead them towards, once they go down their crypto journey and they understand deeper what it's about and some of the things, in this space, like I think they identify with it and can understand the need for it, and why like it almost seems inevitable. That like what you start to realize when people say crypto is inevitable, it's like a little bit of a throwaway term, but like from that lens, you can kind of see where that goes. The other piece then is, and I know speaking for me, I'll get to Bitso in a second. Like I touched a lot of different areas of payments. I did deals with the card networks. I dealt with we issued a credit card, and so just looking at payments closely. It just sort of, you look at the rails, you look at crypto rails and how the product market fit that they seem to have with stablecoins, and like I was just able to identify with that. I don't necessarily think like the card networks are in danger or something like that. I think it's very complementary, but it's again from seeing some of the inefficiencies of the TradFi payments world, and how transactions settle, and a lot of things are still like, a lot of the card networks are still based on certain aspects of their platform are based on very old databases and programming languages and things like that. Again, you can just see how like the rails are almost like inevitable, right? Like we're moving in that direction. They just provide so many benefits. That's me. From the Bitso side, I think this may be more of what you're getting at, and some of this I was fortunate enough to kind of slide right into it. And this stuff had started certainly before my time of joining here. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time and take the ball, and I'm helping run with it now. But Bitso started life 11-ish years ago now as an exchange. It's known mostly to be an exchange, the top exchange in Mexico, operates in Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina. And the way I like to describe it is like Kraken and Coinbase, other large exchanges, their initial, after they kind of got to a certain size as an exchange within their exchange business, their initial expansion was, let's start an institutional arm. Let's start an institutional arm and let's service hedge funds and high net worth individuals and institutional custody and things like that. Bitso, probably by virtue of a lot of different factors of some of the assets it had, being integrated with local payment rails like SPAY in Mexico, as well as just placed in physical place, the fact that it operates in Mexico. Its expansion was what we call Bitso Business, which is cross-border payments arm, right? One of the larger players in the cross-border payment space involving stablecoins, right? Bitso has some of the most liquid books of stablecoins versus MXN versus pesos, and then also has payment rails. And so those are the ingredients for a successful participant in helping facilitate cross-border payments involving stablecoins. And so that was Bitso's expansion. I think that's pretty unique. I don't know of any other exchanges. I'm sure there's some that like that was their expansion as opposed to an institutional arm. But it's from that perspective of operating in the countries that it operates in, and that business arm, that I think Bitso had kind of a privileged front row seat to some of the trends going on, and what was in LATAM in particular, adoption of stablecoins, some of the use cases, right? Like there's no shortage of stablecoin orchestration platforms coming to market today. But Bitso was kind of on the tip of the spear with us a couple of years ago, and so just had a front row seat and realized that sure, dollar stablecoins are primarily used today for these types of flows, but there are some use cases, and I know we'll get into those, of non-dollar stablecoins. And you know what? If anybody has unique ingredients to be able to give a peso stablecoin a good shot and be able to use it in a number of different areas, it's Bitso, with an exchange business, with a cross-border payments business, and obviously with the brand recognition that Bitso does. And so that's, I think, what led Bitso to go down the path of launching an issuer brand like Juno, which is the issuer of MXNB, our peso peg stablecoin.
Yeah, during my time at Bitso, basically everything that you're saying, I can relate to that. I think that Bitso is uniquely positioned in Mexico to execute this because of several reasons. I think that the most important one is the compliance approach that Bitso has in Mexico and in every country. Specifically in Mexico, Bitso is positioned uniquely because of the fintech license and all the relationship with the different entities that Bitso has. That's why basically Bitso is the only exchange with fiat rails in Mexico. Basically, it's the only one. No one else can do this in the way that you are doing it. And also, I remember back at my time at Bitso, back in 2021, we were analyzing the stablecoin initiative, and I have a bunch of fun stories maybe for other time. And I'm really glad to see how this has unfolded, to have a live product that today basically any builder can build upon it. And Ben, I would love to know a little bit more on Bitso's train of thought during the last years. I know why back in my time at Bitso, we started looking at stablecoins. When we met in New York, I told you, dude, if you go to Confluence and I don't know, search for my name, maybe you can see a couple of documents. But I'd love to know today, what are like the critical data points or market insights that made Bitso say, okay, we need to build our own stablecoin and our own issuer? What was that thing that you saw that created Juno?
In terms of, it's a great question, and I'm guessing you could answer part of this. Like you said, you saw the front part of this, so I can only infer from your docs and Confluence and get the knowledge from them. But
you have the whole picture now.
Yeah. Bitso takes the viewpoint that this wave of adoption and innovation on stablecoins as essentially a platform is also sort of inevitable. Like, it was enough of a wave that you can take kind of 2 points. Two viewpoints. One is like, I know we'll probably talk. This is a common topic. Like, what is the use case for non-dollar stablecoins? Because today we all know the numbers. Like, dollar stablecoins dominate on most metrics, and we did see, and by virtue of just talking to dozens of companies, that there are unique use cases. There are some different use cases that local stablecoins fulfill. And so, like, I think at a simple level, we have a few clients right off the bat that we've talked to that would use it in a different way than they use dollar stablecoins. And again, we can talk through those in a bit more depth. Bitso, then, as a part of the reason for launching Juno as its own brand is kind of twofold. One is, Bitso, the brand itself, has a lot of brand equity in it, but it really is known first and foremost as an exchange. And just from a positioning kind of like optics standpoint, it makes sense to not muddle the role. Let Bitso be the exchange brand, and then bring out a new brand that's the issuer. The other piece, though, I think maybe more important, is Juno is a brand, but it's also, maybe more importantly, a platform. So we built on top of, it'd be one thing if we just said, oh, it's the issuer and we have MXNB and it's a stablecoin. Oh, but by the way, you fill out a Google form when you want to mint and burn, which is like, kind of like a bootstrappy way to get going. And there are plenty of stablecoins that operate that way, and there's nothing particularly wrong with that, but it's just not very scalable. Bitso built the Juno Mint platform, and the Juno Mint platform is a full-featured, pretty unique actual platform for minting and burning. And so I think that's the other reason too, is we have this whole product. It's not just a stablecoin. There's a suite of infrastructure that's tied to it that we call Juno, or the Juno Mint platform, and so it just made sense to kind of like have that stand alone. And the way that, some unique things about that platform, we mentioned Bitso's unique position in terms of ability to hold fiat in Mexico and be able to be directly integrated with SPAY. What we've done is we've integrated minting and burning of MXNB with those SPAY ramps. And there's some very unique things that you can do. Not only can you make a SPAY transfer and be minting and then holding MXNB in a matter of about a second, because SPAY is pretty much real time and the minting of MXNB is real time. So you can literally go from fiat to holding a stablecoin in your self-custodial wallet, well, certainly in your Juno wallet, and then whatever the time is to move it into a non-custodial wallet, but in a matter of seconds, and the reverse. But you can also do things, with SPAY, there's some interesting things where you can do mass pay-ins and mass payouts. And that's something that you see a lot offered in like stable payment orchestration and stuff. What we've done is we've tied that to stablecoin issuance as well. So you can do things like a partner can expose a bunch of different what are called claves in the space without getting too deep into it. But you can a partner could use MXNB, have all of their customers send fiat in, and it can result in automated minting of MXNB. And the reverse can also be true. You can burn MXNB that can go out not just to one SPAY address or one bank address, but you can burn MXNB and give instructions and have it go out to 1,000 or 1,000,000 addresses. And so there are some really unique things by tying automated minting and burning of MXNB with Bitso's deep SPAY integration. It makes, like, I'm not aware of any other issuers that have done that. Certainly in Mexico, but even in like USD issuers, usually it's pretty straightforward. It's one-to-one minting and minting and burning, and in this case, it can be one to many or one-to-one. And so some pretty cool things you could build on top of that. Again, it just made sense with that kind of infrastructure to launch it as its own product and give it its own identity.
It seems you've thought a lot about, and Bitso has obviously been working with specifically sort of Bitso business brand, right? And have thought a lot about and have seen a lot of remittance flows and how people might want to use local stablecoins. Something Ab and I have discussed, and we spoke about this with the founders of Felix Pago. We've been speaking about this just constantly over the course of this entire podcast, because there was a really big push at one point to drive local stablecoins across Latin America, right? And we've seen, there's BRLZ, there's MXNB, MXNE, Colombian pesos, et cetera, et cetera. The interesting thing here is that when you look at the volume that oftentimes, at least on chain, right? Oftentimes, like a lot of the volume actually happens off chain, but at least on chain, the volume is, a single basis points compared to what USD might move in that country, right? So we just published sort of a comparison of all these different local stablecoins as well, which indicated that, look, there probably isn't that much volume moving here. So give us the bull case for local stablecoins, because it is something that we're constantly exploring here. Bitso obviously has really unique insights on the market that not a lot of people have, but what was it that you were seeing that said, this is something that we need, we can leverage a lot of our existing infrastructure, but what's kind of the demand side saying there?
Yeah. There's I think there's like a part of it that's a short term or the near term, like what are the use cases? What are we seeing now? And then there's also like a philosophical angle to it, which is like, what do you have to believe? And there's certainly like you could say, I believe in 2 or 3 years or whatever the right number is, things will settle out and we'll just have a world where dollar stablecoins exist and the others sort of fall away. That, I think, is a world where the dollar is exported far and wide. And I just don't know that, for starters, I don't know that governments are like, I think there'll be a lot of problems if that continues unabated. And local stablecoins are actually a tool for balance in that regard, right? When we talk about capital flight or dollarization, like actual local stablecoins that are investing in the sovereign debt of the nation, of the currency that they're pegged to, are actually a counterbalance for that point. But you could say there's no scenario where that exists, and so the dollar stablecoins take over. That's also a world, and I'll touch back on this, in which there's no on-chain FX, which is a kind of a buzzword these days. And so I could go through a few other like kind of points, but like I personally, and Bitso generally, doesn't think that's a realistic view of where we're ending up. Where we are today is a different story. And I do think we're in the first or second inning tops, like of this story. Sure, like there's a lot of excitement over the growing market cap of stablecoins, 250 billion, Circle IPO. But when you look at the grand scheme of GDP of economies globally and the dollar and fund flows, like it's still a drop in the bucket. We still have so much in front of us. And so the other framework or philosophy, I think, says we're on the tip of a wave right now. And that wave, understandably, is starting with dollars, starting with the world's reserve currency. And there are some clear use cases that it started with that if you take that lens and you try to apply it in today's world, and you just try to take the lens and you apply it to the local stablecoin thesis, you're going to come up empty. So, hey, people, dollar stablecoins are used as a trading, reserve currency or trading off ramp on crypto exchanges, like kind of broadly. Do we expect MXNB or BRL1, by the way, which is a Brazilian real peg stablecoin that we're also partners in and co-issuers of? Are people going to start to use those instead of USDT? No, I wouldn't. I don't think so. Argentina, hyperinflation, Venezuela, like people hold USD stablecoins to preserve their wealth in countries like that. Are people going to hold a peso stablecoin? No, they're not. That wouldn't make any sense. And certainly there are a few other use cases, but if you take that lens and you try to like apply it over here, it doesn't fit. It's a square peg in a round hole. But personally, I think it's short-sighted to think that those are the only use cases that exist. You just need to look a little closer and realize that there's the beginnings, there's the germ of things happening, and that we're in the beginning of a wave. To believe that maybe there's a wave and there's a progression that's happening over the next 2 to 3 years, maybe more. That's 2 to 3 years is like my number that I throw out. That's kind of my personal expectations. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen faster. Maybe it'll happen slower. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of the thesis that we're going on. And those specific use cases, I can dig in a little deeper on them. I'll give you kind of 2 of them, of some of the things we see out of the gate, some of the early stuff. One of them is what I would broadly term market access. And in the same way, it's actually kind of similar to the way that, Americans, I don't believe are the top holders of dollar stablecoins. It's outside of America. It's giving access to the dollar to folks outside of America, or enabling companies outside of America to build with the dollar or a digital dollar equivalent. And there's no reason why that same principle is not interesting in other countries. And so we've seen that already with MXNB. So there are companies that want to enter Mexico. They want to offer their products and services that have financial products and services. And for a variety of reasons, it's better, faster, optimized, more efficient, makes more sense, more cost effective, like depends upon the nature of the company. But there are a variety of reasons why we've seen companies that say, yeah, it's actually better if we do this with a digital peso. Like we don't actually need to deal with fiat, or at least like as a core, maybe we on-ramp with fiat, but we immediately turn it into a digital peso. And there's things we can do with that can help us get to market faster, with less hassle. We can move things around faster, and so on. So that's one, is this market access component. The other one that is a trend that I mentioned it before, and this is like my favorite topic. I can talk about this all day long, and I want to engage with as many people as possible in the space that are also interested in this. Is this notion of on-chain FX? You can't have on-chain FX with just dollar stablecoins. So you either think the FX market, which is the broadest in notional terms financial market in the world by far, you either think that it's not going to go on-chain. There's no reason for it to go on-chain. It will remain how it is. Which, by the way, the spot FX market trades a lot of different ways, but like as far as I know, some of it still happens like by phone calls and messages in Bloomberg terminals and things like that. And so you can say, nope, it's going to kind of stay that way, or stay in the TradFi version, or no, there is an avenue for it going on chain. And if you think that that's true, that there are reasons why crypto rails provide interesting, at least complement to the TradFi FX market, global FX market, you can't have that in a dollar-only stablecoin world. Like that's also another part of the thesis of the wave that I think we're riding here. And we're seeing investment, and we're seeing companies speak this. It's not just me pitching it or believing it. Like we're being approached, and we're running into companies that are saying, oh great, we're trying to onboard with like all the G20 currencies, pick the best, and we're starting to put liquidity and investment into it.
I think this is a conversation again that Ab and I pretty much have at every episode around what happens
every day.
Every day
in Slack.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think it's a binary conversation either, right? Because I think there's the long tail of current currencies that we use today. I'm actually quite bearish on, right? And so we've seen it already happen. The currency controls happen in these smaller Latin American countries where there isn't perhaps as much on-chain FX happening with, let's say, the Bolivar or the Boliviano, right? And the Guatemalan Quetzal, which is where I'm from, although there is a fair amount of volume there, given all the remittances, which has actually held up a lot of the value for the Quetzal, for example. But so I do think that like the long tail actually is kind of at risk for people basically fleeing to dollars, right? But I do think that, and that doesn't mean that all currencies will, like everything will be dollarized, right? So what I do think needs to happen, and I think this is where a lot of countries actually have a really interesting opportunity, is to start issuing local stablecoins and to start thinking about, given that DeFi is just a much better way to move money around and peer-to-peer networks are much more efficient ways of allocating capital and debt markets and so forth. I do think that, and we've seen Brazil, which is the region's most advanced financial economy, really push the envelope here, right? And so I think that that's really where a lot of countries should be heading towards, is saying, recognizing that peer-to-peer distributed systems and markets are the way that everyone will be using, because it's, crypto is unstoppable money, right? in theory, Bitcoin in particular, but I think these stablecoins also could be programmed in such a way. And so for particularly for the long tail assets, I think they should be thinking a lot more about kind of where they can leverage DeFi innovation into their stack, right? I'm curious, Ab, what you think about this, right? Because it is like a conversation that we're constantly going back and forth, and we'll do a proper debate. Maybe even it'll be at the Stablecoin conference on what happens to local currencies in a world where everything's being dollarized.
Ben, you said that this is your favorite topic. Well, it's mine too. So this is the moment to talk.
We're in the right place. I came to the right place.
Yeah, exactly. I'm writing an essay with Joker that we should publish it. We are long overdue because basically everything that you just said is part of my thesis. What happens when the stablecoins, the dollar stablecoins, are the best way to export US debt to anywhere? Because dollarized stablecoins are basically the only buyers of almost zero interest bonds. And who will be willing to buy those? Basically every Latin American country. And in LATAM, there's an infinite demand for dollars. What happens if there's an infinite demand, then it'll mean that basically local currencies, if you go into this extreme, go to zero, right? I don't think that that'll happen. Definitely governments are not going to be super happy about that. And the other thing that you mentioned about local stablecoins of we cannot have on-chain effects without having the full sandwich, right? We need the top bread and the bottom bread. You need USD and the counterparty currency. And I think that's so important because the Mexican peso, maybe you have more information about this, but I think that the Mexican peso is in the top 5 most traded currencies in FX markets. So
I don't know. I think dollar peso, if I understand correct, like that pair is a top 5 pair, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. And if we talk about on-chain effects, it's not gonna happen. You cannot have centralized liquidity and then call it on-chain effects. That will be just like USDC transfers, right? And there are a lot of exciting startups building around this. So basically, the one of the key words that you mentioned is that we need to find a balancing point. And this is something that if you are not in the industry and you do not listen to Frontera, maybe you don't understand it because you think that local stablecoins don't make sense. And to the 2 elements that you mentioned, I'd like to mention a third one. You mentioned like new types of cases, then on-chain effects. And the third one is more crypto native and it's super exciting. It's more along the way. But I think that there's also this, when you realize that when you have a liquid enough pair between MXNB and USDC or any local stablecoin and a USD stablecoin, basically you connected the local financial system to DeFi. And you can start using Aave, you can do lending, you can do borrowing, you can do like infinite swaps. So it's a moment where you realize that the future has come for money, for digitalized money. And upon on that same train of thought, I would love to know, we are really excited about this future, but it's in the building phase. What's limiting today's local stablecoin adoption? Because I think it'll be a moment of 0 to 1, and 1 to, like 0 to 1 will take or has taken 5 years. 1 to 100 it will take 2 years, and 100 to 1,000 it'll take 6 months. So it's really hard to catch that trend. And if we identify the blockers, maybe we can size the market opportunity. So what are the main blockers?
I think in the way that what we've seen the past, 5-10 years, the growth of stablecoins today, I would call it a grassroots retail to institutional arc. It started off very retail. This was a way for crypto traders to not have to deal with dollars on exchanges, right? So it was a very retail focused thing. And then it has proceeded to work up chain into things like payments. And now we're at the cusp of like dollar stablecoins are, institutions can't move fast enough to figure out their dollar stablecoin strategy. I think that actually the next portion of it, and in particular how I think about local stablecoins, it will go in reverse. It will be an institutional to grassroots to retail. I don't expect, like Mexicans to just be using MXNB to make peer-to-peer transfers tomorrow, or Brazilians use BRL1 to make peer-to-peer transfers tomorrow. our focus is largely on institutional, and I think there are, when we say like what has been holding it back, I think for anything other than the dollar, it needs to start institutional and trickle down from there. And the holdback has been twofold. One is simply institutions getting comfort and getting into it. And clearly they will start, and they are starting with a dollar stablecoin approach. What let's have a strategy. And I mean institutions, everything from banks to asset managers to even to like the Stripes of the world and PSPs and things like that. Like it's all clearly starting with dollar stablecoins, as you'd expect. There's nothing wrong with that. But then once they get comfortable with that, I think certainly those institutions will move on to what's next. Like, okay, time to expand, land and expand, and that will, I hypothesize that will encompass additional local stablecoins. And furthermore, then the obvious, the really big obvious gorilla in the room is regulatory. As these institutions are waiting. I mean, we expect, the Genius Bill might pass in a matter of days here, if you guys, I'm sure, are following it. And while that's a US only regulation, obviously, like it probably will start a domino effect. And it is a signal globally that will have an impact and that will ripple throughout the world. And so that I think is also the big unlock for the institutions, one, to go full-fledged into their dollar stablecoin aspirations, which is like the gateway drug for the institutions, so to speak. And that's why I think then the institutions will be the first ones to start to put together, through things like on-chain FX, through things like balancing treasury operations among geographies. There's all sorts of like use cases like that that I think institutions are going to put together first before it trickles down into your average retail user using a local stablecoin on an everyday basis.
I love the approach that you say, Ben, because it's really clear to put it that way. Like US stablecoins started from grassroots to institutional, local stablecoins go the other way around. And it makes a lot of sense because of the use case, right? USD stablecoin started, USDT launched on Bitcoin first. That's kind of crazy. And it launched on Bitcoin because they needed to, like a trading pair versus a stable coin, like a USD equivalent. And the main use case, the first use case of a stablecoin was trading, just to have something to reference the trading books, not to Bitcoin, but to USD, right? And as crypto started like a speculative industry, that made a lot of sense. And the use cases that I forecast for local stablecoins are more around payments, money movement, and those type of use cases. And when you have that approach, the big money movers of the world are not people or institutions. So it makes a lot of sense, that approach. And actually, I think that's going to be part of the essay that we publish with this episode, because it's a clear example of how like the two elements converge and the two waves converge. In order for USD stablecoins to converge with local stablecoins, they meet at an institutional level. And that's happening. And the unfold for that is, as you said, the Genius Act. Kush, I know that you wanted to say something.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned institutions, Ben. I actually, Bitso does a lot of work with these larger institutions, right? But one of the really interesting trends about working in Latin America is you can basically look to what's happening in the US, sometimes Europe, and just say, oh, give it, the lag time is decreasing every day more and more, but, give it some time and eventually the same thing will happen there. So you can sort of front run a lot of activation. So we're seeing a lot of interest from the world's largest financial institutions in North America and Europe, basically North America in particular, being drawn towards stablecoins. What's the appetite and the reception with regards to the sort of future of money? Because, Ab and I do have this thesis, it's like all money's going to come on chain, right? And institutions can either choose to adapt to that or not. And the ones that do are the ones that are going to win, and the ones that don't, well, just simply won't make it. But give us a sense for how these institutions are thinking, particularly in Latin America. Like, what conversations are they drawn towards? What really excites them about this thesis of all money coming on chain? How excited are they, or are they still trying to wrap their heads around what a block is, right? Where it's the general sort of sentiment unfolding there?
Yeah, I certainly can't speak for all institutions. And I wish we had more conversations than I have the time for, the ability to engage in with institutions in LATAM. I'll tell you the sense I have from conversations we have, as well as just feedback from our sales team, is still that it's just so early. Like you sort of alluded to it. Like Circle IPO is it was a wake up moment. The Circle IPO and subsequent quadrupling of the share price, I think, is like a key asterisk on that. was a wake up moment for a lot in this space. I know that's like not necessarily institutions, that's maybe investors, but but before that, Stripe buying Bridge obviously is like being seen as kind of a watershed wake up moment because Stripe's coming to eat your lunch, other large institution, and so I think these are the catalysts, along with like some. They're just watching, eventually they go on LinkedIn, even if they're not following it, and they see somebody post this chart showing stablecoin growth this way. I think a lot of people were enthralled, maybe not the institutions, but at the end of the day, institutions are just people, and these people are, in the space, are following what's going on broadly in payments, and they see things and kind of colors their understanding. I think a lot of people enthralled by like the post around Tether's profit per employee, right? Like that got a lot of people, that like captured a lot of popular imagination. But what I mean by this is like, I do think that the majority of them are putting it together. There's some companies that are on the forefront. I'll give examples. I mean, obviously Stripe is charting its course. There's companies like Nuvei that have always been have been very, I'd say, like forward thinking. But there's others that are like just putting it together now. And as one data point, to just like suggest that this is the case, which is like a very anecdotal data point. But I don't know if you guys have this. There's these, or if you get contacted, there's these expert networks, which are like the things where, usually it's consulting firms. There's these companies that will put together, they'll kind of like get experts in a space and they'll convince them to get on a phone call, like a compensated phone call with somebody who wants to pay for their time to like get up to speed or speak to somebody on the inside of, obviously nothing like non-public, but just like get up to speed on something. And there's usually two consumers of that service, like the companies that are doing this, investors, and it's consulting firms. And those consulting firms are probably trying to get up to speed because they have some large corporate that is engaged with them and has just signed $1 million contract to be like, hey, consulting firm. The consulting firm has said like, oh, we're experts in this. And then they got to like scramble to get up to speed. But as one very anecdotal data point, in the past 3 weeks, the number of like pings that I have gotten about stablecoins has 5x. Like almost every day I'm getting another ping of this. And so what that says to me, if you like read between the lines on this, is like, this is a sign of institutions like kind of like tripping over themselves to get up to speed fast. So I do just think like a lot of them are still just learning and are trying to get up to speed.
That's so funny. I used to do management consulting and I used to use those services. And most of the time those calls were absolutely useless and super expensive. And I'm also getting pinged. And by curiosity, sometimes I open those mails and it's just such a burden to get into those calls that I just avoid them. But you're right. It's a great read. Like it's anecdotal signs of demand, of real demand, or at least exploration, right? So it's really exciting. Maybe if we put an example, Stripe's acquisition of Bridge was like opening the gas, and gas started going out. And now with Circle's IPO, someone got a match close, and now we have a fire in a good way. Like we have power. We have we have a stove that it's opened, and that flame is just gonna grow in the upcoming years. And Ben, we're getting to the end of the episode. I'd love to hear what's coming for Juno. What are you building? What are the next steps? There's a stablecoin conference that we're partnering with you guys at Bitso to help in a couple of panels. But I'd love to hear what are you up to in the next 6 to 18 months?
Yeah. I'm glad you called out the stablecoin conference. I'd be remiss to not take the opportunity to call it out, and I can't wait to hang out with you guys there. Look, August 27th, 28th in Mexico City. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I've seen this as a buzzword that I'm running with because I think crypto people like to term their summers, right? Was it 2021 was DeFi summer? This is stablecoin summer. I've seen this tossed around. I've seen it hashtag. This is stablecoin summer, and the capstone of the stablecoin summer is going to be the stablecoin conference LATAM in Mexico City, August 27th to 28th. And I don't say that obviously I'm biased, but like the amount of actual like interest and sponsorship and companies that are like flooding into it now, I think it's going to be a badass event. Like I think it's going to be a ton of fun. And for any listeners, I mean, your listeners probably skew in the region, but for anybody who hasn't been to Mexico City, it is one of the most fun, dynamic cities in the world. And I think people should, if they haven't, like, this is a fantastic opportunity to come and hang. We'll show them a good time. It's Bitso's home market. It's abs there. Like, we'll show them a good time, and it'll be an amazing event. So for sure that is on the horizon. For Juno, sorry, I was cutting you off. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I love that energy, but don't call the top yet. We're just starting.
Yeah,
The Stablecoin conference won't be the top. We'll keep going,
it's
man.
a
But
waypoint.
yeah, exactly.
That's a great call.
Also, Frontera 10 on the Stablecoin website conference to get a 10% discount as well. So calling that out as well. Looking forward to seeing everybody there.
That's
What's next?
a good call.
What's
So
coming?
for Juno, the Juno Mint platform was not built just to house MXNB. It's built to scale. We're not, as of now, planning to compete in like stablecoins as a service and just like launch stablecoins left and right. There are certainly platforms that do that. We are opportunistic, and the BRL1, participating in the BRL1 consortium was an opportunity that presented itself to partner with some other strong players in Brazil, Mercado Bitcoin, Foxbit, and Kai Invest, and launch. And I think we'll take a similar approach. And the nice thing now is we have the infrastructure to do it. We're considering bringing BRL1 onto Juno, which will kind of unlock a lot of the things with BRL1, and I think we'll continue to be opportunistic. But that's not the primary goal, is to go out and like add the number, multiply the number of stablecoins on Juno. It is really to grow the stablecoins that we're committed to, and MXNB still has a long way to go. We launched it and have like quietly learned from there. And if you look at the metrics on MXNB, they're fairly muted. We're actually live on 2 blockchains, and there's more activity on one of them than the other. And it's a little hard to parse what's going on behind the scenes. There's a bunch of product unlocks coming, shall we say, and we just need to keep our head down on that. So that's I think the kiss of death with any tech company is to get out over your skis and spread yourself too thin, increase your surface area. I think we lost Kush, but and so that's that. We need to keep our heads down and stay focused, and really that means focusing on the tokens that we have launched.
Yeah, really excited about that. I'm really happy to see the evolution of MXNB. Then definitely we're gonna throw a VIP closing party for the Stablecoin conference. If you're a Frontera reader or subscriber, you might get access to it. I'm joking. We can have you there, and definitely you'll be there. And Ben, thank you for coming. It was really nice meeting you in New York a couple of weeks ago. Thank you for reading Frontera. Where can people learn more about Juno and MXNB?
Yeah, well, I took the opportunity to put it right here in my name. buildwithjuno.com is the website that has access to any Bitso business clients. It is shared back end. So Bitso business clients, any Bitso institutional clients actually already have access to it with their same credentials. So that makes it nice and easy. But Build with Juno is where you learn about the platform. There's a separate website for MXNB. But anybody can always also tag me. I'm more of a LinkedIn guy than I am an X or a Twitter guy. But you can also find our products on there as well as me, and reach out. And I'd love to talk to anybody about any listeners about it. But that's where to find out. I appreciate you having me on. It's a fun talk, and it's a little bit of like preaching to the choir, because I think we think alike. But I think there's some stuff. I can't wait to read your guys' posts. Like I think you guys do a great job. Kind of framing things the right way, and there's a very it's pretty insightful, some of the things you guys are writing, and with all of the obviously I'm biased, but so much of the focus says the same things about dollar stablecoins, and I think you guys ask some unique questions that should be asked that maybe isn't being covered in the breathless coverage of the stablecoin mania that we're going through right now. So keep up the good work.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Ben. It's also a shout out for Joker. We found a great way of writing articles just to share with the community. Each Monday, Joker and I have a meeting, and we say we're writing about this, and this. When we need to build Excels, he does it. And on Wednesdays, we reread it, make some notes. Most of the time, I have 0 notes. So Joker is like a great writer. And thank you for coming. Thank you for coming, Ben. You that are listening, part of Frontera community, go and subscribe to the newsletter. Also, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and Spotify. And then thank you for coming, and see you next time. See you in August in real life. If you come before to Mexico, hit me up and we'll get some tacos or something. See you. Thank you, man.
Bye.